Let's get to the story. This was a story last week. I remember talking about this a couple of different times, but let's try to get more because this is from Leger. A new Leger poll revealing a pretty stark divide between Quebec and the rest of Canada over bilingualism. So I'll get Andrew Enns, who's an executive vice president of Leger's Central Canada Division, to explain. Andrew, thank you for being here. Let me start by saying, typically when we say there's a stark divide between Quebec and the rest of Canada, it is over language. But I'm surprised by this. What surprised you in here? The fact, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, I'm sorry, but to me, what surprised me is just the fact that Quebec is so farther ahead than the rest of Canada.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your program, Aaron. And I don't know if I was really surprised at some of these things, although certainly, to see it kind of in the black and white in our polling, does catch your attention. Just how Canadians perceive bilingualism in terms of, is it a positive, negative thing for the country, or does it leave you indifferent? In Quebec, you had 70% of our respondents said it was they felt it was positive. In the rest of the country, that number was half, 35%. Right there out of the gate, you see quite a difference in opinions.
When you say Quebec and the word bilingual together, I mean, usually, at least for us here, we know that that's not a big winner for you, certainly not in terms of governments, not the last couple anyway. So to see that so many Quebecers like this idea, 70%, you're saying, say they view bilingualism positively. To me, that was the first surprising thing I saw here. But my next question would be, it's important to kind of consider this in context, right? Have we seen these numbers? You've done this polling in the past. Have the numbers changed dramatically, or has this always sort of been the case?
No, from what I talked to a couple colleagues of mine, and there's always been this divide on bilingualism. And to your point, there's always been a little bit of an interesting, kind of paradox amongst Quebec on this question, in the sense of the support for bilingualism within the province.
Yeah, and again, which is why it's surprising to see the number that high. So the question itself, can you just frame it? How was this asked?
Well, certainly. So that first question that I just referenced, for you personally, is Canada's official bilingualism something positive, negative, or does it leave you indifferent? And Quebecers responded, 70% said it felt, for them it was positive, whereas in the rest of Canada it was 35%. So clearly the concept of bilingualism in Canada is certainly something that's positive. And again, we asked another question in terms of just how important it is in official bilingualism for Canada. 83% of Quebecers felt that official bilingualism in Canada is important. Again, almost 2-to-1 strength compared to in the rest of the country.
Is there a provincial breakdown of this as well? Are there some provinces that are more receptive than others?
There is. We do have a provincial breakdown. Ontario is probably next on the list, followed by Atlantic Canada as being a bit more receptive of more positive toward bilingualism, a bit more of the feeling it's important, but still at 50%, still well back of how Quebec residents feel about bilingualism and its importance.
Yeah, which brings up that quote, right? Sébastien Poitras describing it as a myth, this idea of coast-to-coast official bilingualism, which is why I'm trying to understand this in context, right? If this was the same way 2, 3, 5, 10 years ago, that would be one thing. But if it has changed over the past few years, that would seem to me to represent something else. Do we even know that?
I honestly, I'd have to dig back a little bit more on that. I don't feel that things will have changed. Certainly not, I would suggest, in the past 5 years.
Okay.
And I say that, Aaron, in the part because, first of all, Canadians, I think, have been quite preoccupied just in general on some other things, a pandemic, and then sort of some massive inflation stuff. So I don't think this is something that's really been, something that they've been thinking about in the context of potentially changing or evolving views. So, I'd venture to say that these views haven't changed that much in the past while.
It's interesting. We had a politician here actually in Quebec of not the party in power, but the opposition, the provincial Liberals here, who made a point of, I guess this goes back about a month or so, coming out and suggesting that, the rest of Canada, there should be more people speaking French, which caught a lot of people here by surprise. Because, as I said, he's not part of the government. He's the opposition. And the French-English divide here has always been rather severe between the Liberals and the independentist parties. But based on these results, would it be fair to say that, Canada cares about preserving French?
Well, look, I think there was a question we had in here. We presented two statements and asked people which one best reflected their own personal opinion. Canada's official bilingualism is at the heart of Canadian identity. Canada's official bilingualism exists only to satisfy a minority. So two fairly opposing views. And what we found is in Quebec, there's quite a strong majority, 60%, feel Canada's official bilingualism is at the heart of Canadian identity. But outside the country, okay, it's not quite as strong. It's 35% say that. 49% are of the minority, but I would suggest that 35%, that's a pretty good reflection of there's a significant part of the population outside of Quebec that does feel bilingualism is important, is an important part of Canada and Canadian identity. So it's not a majority, but it's not an insignificant, amount. So I think it is worth, sort of from a political standpoint, being understanding the fact that bilingual is important to people.
It's interesting.
Regardless where you live.
As I hear you say that, I think to myself, and I'd never really thought of it this way until you just mentioned it, but when tourists come here, right, from another country, say they're coming here from America, who don't have that great a knowledge of Canada to begin with, and when they come in, they land in, in BC, for example, or in Alberta, whether they even know that Canada is a bilingual country.
Yeah. I depending on where you visit in the country, I suspect that's absolutely the case, and probably taken aback a little bit. But I suspect when they go and visit sort of some other parts of the country, they're probably taken aback by the the different languages that they could come across. Mm-hmm. So it's a big country, and that's probably one of the challenges that bilingualism in general faces in Canada. In the sense that you can be in parts of the country where French is not spoken very often at all.
Right. And that's, of course, the challenge in terms of making a country bilingual. That's a huge challenge. By the way, that is an unfair question to ask you, Andrew. I didn't mean to kind of throw that at you, about U.S. tourists. I'm sure for half of them who come here, they're surprised to find out Canada has running water. Andrew Enns, Executive Vice President, Léger Central Canada Division. Thanks so much for the time, Andrew. Appreciate it.
I appreciate the interest in our poll, and happy to chat, Aaron.
Take good care. You bet.